It's time to learn some lore. This week we're looking at the Mad Mage himself, Halister Blackcloak, how you can add a story to Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and how to use that campaign in any setting of your choice. Welcome to We Speak Common. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the D&D podcast for everyone, because here we speak common. This is the show brought to you in partnership with The Dice Dungeon, your one-stop shop for beautifully made metal, resin, and now glass D&D dice. Yes, glass D&D dice. I too was a little bit nervous when I heard it, but upon seeing them on the website, oh my god, they're gorgeous. And if you are worried about rolling them, just grab yourself a felt-lined rolling tray, or maybe even a dice scroll from the Dice Dungeon while you're there. And hey, we've had like 3 book announcements in the last month. Pre-order one of those bad boys while you're over there and use the code WeSpeakCommon for 10% off your entire basket on checkout. All the links to their websites and all that kind of stuff, all the goodness in the description below. We're also partnered with the incredible service known as Describe, spelled D-S-C-R-Y-B. Describe is your one-stop shop for creative writing. If you flunked out of your English GCSE like me, that's a lie. I scraped the barrel. Then go and have a look at what they've got going on. They are hiring professional creative writers to give you box text for your home games like you would find in published D&D adventures. And you can fit them into any homebrew world or game you've got going on, whether it's a one-shot or a full-on level 20 campaign. There's loads of them for free. But if you want to get full access to the entire catalogue that grows every single week, over 1,500 pieces of box text for you, then you need to subscribe. You get 10% off your monthly subscription for 2 years every single month with the code COMMON at checkout. There's a link to that in the description too. I do just want to give a big shout out to those of you that support the show directly on Patreon. It's been booming this week. I think we've made a handful of people, I don't even know the number, a handful of people have rejoined or have joined the server and are supporting the show directly. We hang out on the We Speak Common server. We talk about D&D, about life, the universe and everything, and we have a general laugh. And we also sit in the VC channels and talk to each other on pretty much a daily basis at the moment. It's my favourite place to hang on the internet, and I don't just say that because, I made it. I actually do genuinely really, really love it. So if you want to come and join us there, supporting the show directly on Patreon is the way to do that. If you don't want to do that, because who wants to pay for free content on the internet? I'm with you. You go, girl. Just do me a favour and share the podcast with your D&D fellow friends and groups and whatnot. Even your D&D enemies. Send it to Jarl Axel. Right, with all of that done and out of the way, you may have heard him laugh halfway through the intro. That's cool. I'm glad I made you smile. Sam, how you doing?
Apologies. Hello.
I gotta leave it in now that I've said that as well.
Yeah, no, you got me there. It tickled me. I was trying to hold it back the whole time, but hey.
Yeah, it's the classic British humour.
Yeah, classic.
How do you find yourself on this ridiculously hot day?
Oh, I've had a great day. F1.
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton bringing it home. Oh, fabulous.
I knew you were going to talk about that. I was waiting for it. I had to stop myself from texting you like, oh, I bet you're happy, boy.
Yeah, I absolutely lost my shit today. And it was very nerving at the start, and then it all went well. And I was like, yeah, okay. Good result for my boy Lando as well. People that aren't into F1. 2 very good drivers that I wanted to win.
Yeah.
Got
Mate,
decent positions.
If only we'd have won the Euros as well, we'd both be celebrating.
The what?
But yeah, exactly. Now, Sam is joining me from the echo chamber that is his bedroom.
No, it's a dining room.
Oh, that's why it's so echoey, you bastard. You just don't care about the listeners of this podcast.
I need to eat as well, so
yeah. You better not be eating while we're talking. I will slap you.
I've got a roast dinner just sitting here, like.
Oh God. Okay. classic English roast. And are you at the house with the really shit Wi-Fi as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this could go awfully, but
it could be. It could be quite bad.
As I say, I mean, do you know what I say every week that we put in the highest production value into this show every single week. But it's nice for it not being me causing the potential problems for a week. So
yeah, that's
thanks
good.
for that. Yeah.
You know, you have been causing problems for quite a few weeks, and a lot of the people in management have been, you know, having issues with that. You know, they're having to set you bigger budgets because, you know, there are so many problems coming out of it.
Look, when your
it's
management consists of immortal beings from the realms of space, there's not really much you can do to please them.
Exactly. You just kind of have to deal with it.
I try my best. Look, as long as they don't possess me and send me to conquer worlds, I'm happy. So there's that. Cool. Okay. Well, with all the pleasantries out of the way, let's talk about D&D. Let's do that thing that we do.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited about this one. I think I have wanted to talk about this for a little while. I've sort of thrown the idea out there a couple of times, and do you know what? We've sworn a few times already. Fuck it. This time we're doing it. So this is a Legends and Lore episode all about, well, kind of two things really. Halister Blackcloak and the mega dungeon, the mega dungeon of all mega dungeons, Undermountain, and how you can take that and use it in any game, but also how you can add a bit of story to the Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure, which is sorely lacking it. So I guess the best place to start then would be the lore of both Halister and Undermountain, right? So how much do you know going into this, Sam?
Loads. Me and Halister are actually like best mates, and he tells me all about the Undermountain quite frequently. I don't know. I know a couple of things. There's stuff that I've learned sort of naturally through playing in your games, and in the games, it like lore is presented in a nice way where you learn at the same time. So yeah, I don't know. I've learned naturally because when I used to sit in for the dragon heist, there was Halister actually appeared, I believe.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Yeah, and he was crazy. He was mental. He was like he was a very interesting, like from a roleplay perspective, like a very interesting character to see, because it was like, oh shit, this guy's been driven mad by this place that he is in. So yeah. So I know that there are certain things I know, but there's definitely like some black spots that I'm like, who?
Do you mean black cloaks? Sorry,
black cloaks.
That's awful. That's an awful joke. Okay, cool. So I will talk about how I've used Halister a little bit later, and that will come into like the way I used him was to set up an ongoing story for Dungeon of the Mad Mage should the players go that way. So I'll talk about that later. But let's talk about who the man, the myth, and the legend actually is. So those of you that have no idea who Halister Blackcloak is, he is the aforementioned Mad Mage who inhabits the mega dungeon known as Undermountain that sits underneath the city of Waterdeep on the Sword Coast. And this dungeon has been a massive part of D&D for years. Loads. I mean, I think there's a book that tried to. It did what Dungeon of the Mad Mage did, but on a lesser level. It gave out loads of the levels in, I think, 3rd and 4th edition. There were a couple of them. So it goes back quite a few years. I think it goes back even further than that. But Halister was a human known as Halister. That was his birth name. And he was a wizard. He was very good. And he would, do what wizards do and hold these spell moots where all these wizards would come together and they would talk and exchange secrets and spells. And he would take on hundreds and hundreds of apprentices. Like, he wasn't that kind of wizard that just had one. He had loads. And he went a bit mad with power to an extent. Not the madness that he's now known for, but he kind of went a bit power hungry, a bit power crazy. And he took his 7 best apprentices. And I've got to say, this is paraphrasing as well, because with any well-known D&D character, there's like ridiculous amounts of lore and you could go so much deeper than this, but we're going to get to the point that you need to use him. He took his 7 apprentices who were then from that point known as the 7, like a rip-off of the boys. And he went to the location that would later become Waterdeep. So, as a bit of history, this is where Undermountain and Halister kind of cross over to begin with. The Waterdeep is a city built on Mount Waterdeep, right? And that location, thousands of years in the past, like before, we're talking like an age or two before, when locations that we know as names had different names. There were different civilizations and different, what's the word? Like alliances and stuff. Like all the places had different names because there were different races and different people. There was an elven civilization that settled on the site of Mount Waterdeep, and they had like a city or like a town or whatever they referred to it in their language. They had a place of living, and something happened. They decided that they didn't want to be there anymore, and the lore gets kind of fuddled. Some people say they wanted to transcend to a different plane. Others say that they wanted to just move and go somewhere else. They were very powerful magic users. This is like before the time of magic as we know it now, back like before even the Neferese and 10th and 12th level magic spells and things. So they were extremely powerful. And so these elves did this ritual. They decided they were going to either up and leave and go to another plane, or they were going to leave and go somewhere else. But they decided that they wanted to leave no trace of their existence here. And so they cast this ritual, this spell, and it removed the essence of them. That in itself is very, very difficult to do, and really, really sort of like naughty magic that you don't really want to put your fingers in. But they did it. But being wizards and spellcasters and people of the Weave, they fucked it up as per usual, and they left this kind of like essence in the Weave. So the Weave, of course, if you don't know, is like
a little
the magic
tangle.
source.
Did they create like a little? I imagine it like a spider web, and they've just gone and like removing themselves, they've just gone and tied it in
that's
a knot.
That's a really interesting way of seeing it. So I always imagine. So the Weave is like a thing that you can't imagine, right? It's like is source of magic. It's a thing that's beyond comprehension. But I've always imagined the Weave as this like line. Think of how the timeline is represented in Loki.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I've always imagined it. Like this line of magic threads that are weaved together, and they constantly like just move through time and through the planes. That's how I've always pictured it in my head. And they're tinkering with the Weave and casting of this magic ritual took that straight line, twisted it over itself, pulled it through, and pulled it so tight that there is now a permanent knot in the Weave. And that's how it's referred to in the source material. There is a knot in the Weave on the site that will eventually become Waterdeep.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy. It's pretty disastrous to think about. I mean, no one knows what that would mean and what that would do. And I think the idea is even that Mystra, the goddess that looks over the Weave, she couldn't untangle it. She didn't really understand what they'd done to fuck it up so badly, but they did.
They did like one of those sailor knots that was just you can go back from that. People have tried untying it, and
You do realise that sailor knots inherently are made so that they're very easy to undo.
I don't know. I don't sail.
they're knots that are really complicated because there's like one rope that if you pull it, the whole thing just drops apart.
Oh, okay. That's the wrong thing to say. They're
absolutely.
They're like anti-sailor knots.
Sure. They're like
works.
when you have like a necklace that gets in a knot and all the chain links come
that's
together
really
and
annoying.
you can't
You don't want that,
like.
especially
like
not in your magical Weave. You don't want that.
No, that would surely it'll be fine, right? No one's gonna go and like settle on there and go mad. It'll be fine.
No, definitely not.
Enter Halister and the Seven. And at this point, he is ridiculously powerful, and he's at the point where he's going to, or he has been, looking at like devils and demons and other planial creatures and things, and that's where his interest is. But he got a bit paranoid about it. He poked into some people's business that he shouldn't have, and the idea is that he's a little bit like, oh, I've seen things and they've changed me. So he gets to the site, says, yes, this is my home now, I'm going to live here. And he summons a bunch of devils, like low-level devils, and says, "Off you go, build me a tower." And that's what they do. They build him a tower. They're in servitude to him.
How badass is that? Like,
it's really fucking cool.
First of all, he can summon demons and devils and just things from like the far realms to like drag in. That's pretty cool in its own right. But then, the bit I like more is that he's just like, build me a fucking tower.
Literally. And you'll come to understand that, like, when we talk about powerful creatures and powerful wizards, like, this guy is on another level. So they build Halister's Hold, as it's known, and I've always imagined it as like just a straight tower, and that's it. But upon building their foundations, they discover the ancient cave systems that exist within Mount Waterdeep. And I think these like belonged to dwarves at one point, and then they were something else at another point. So like they're these pre-existed tunnels, and they go deep. Like they're not just, they don't start at ground level, at sea level. They start in the mountain and they go even further down into the Underdark. They're huge. And
they had like a bad history with like drow attacks and stuff like that, didn't they?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. Yeah. Because Halister then has problems with drow too, because he basically builds his tower, and then instead of freeing all of the devils that he's enslaved to build it, he sends them down into the tunnels and says, "Start building me a basement or something." And they they start doing that. And so they sort of explore. He sends them off to explore and investigate, and they upset like the drow, and they upset whoever else lives down there, and all that kind of stuff. So that's really annoying. I'm selling something on bloody Facebook marketing. They've just asked if they can come and collect it now. I'm just not going to see it until later.
Tell them to...
I am recording a D&D
right
podcast right now.
Yeah, we need them to come on and be like, can I buy this from you?
No, we're not doing that. We're absolutely not doing that. They're not coming in my house. Anyway.
New sub show.
So this basement starts getting built, and Halister and the Seven live their lives there, and there's some like one of the apprentices doesn't really like Halister and they fall out, and then the rest like are all with him, and like there's the inter-party conflict, as you could call it, but that's not overly important. Well, I mean, it is if you want to go deep in the lore, but for this we're going to ignore it. So eventually there comes a point where Halister decides he's going to build a dungeon, right? He's like, I'm going to build a big dungeon. So he starts changing this basement into a dungeon, and he descends into it, and he becomes obsessed with building it out, exploring it, making it, like look good, feel good, have traps, have whatever he needs as a dungeon, have like laboratory levels and a level for a spa and a level for a swimming pool and like all the stuff that a wizard needs in a big dungeon, right?
Yeah.
And the 6 remaining apprentices follow him down there. I think they get concerned about him because he doesn't come back up. So they follow him down and they look for him and they start exploring. And I think like 3 of them die, and the rest of them stay apprentices to him, as far as I'm aware. I didn't focus too much on them. I focused more on Halister in the recap research I did for this episode.
I feel like they're quite integral to knowing Halister Blackcloak, Ben, so I'm kind of disappointed, but we move.
Okay, all right, fine.
No, I don't want to hear about his...
Cool. Don't you test me, boy. Let me just search the recesses of my brain. So you've got 7 of them. Shardine Malafort was a Nephirese necromancer. Trobriad was the Metal Mage, was his name. He had a gift for building metal constructs. Muaral, I think is how you pronounce that name, was the Mishappen. They were a great warrior who served as Halister's bodyguard, who was then an apprentice, and I think the madness overcame him, and he transformed into like a centaur-like creature, but he had a scorpion body instead of a horse body. Yeah, it's fucking weird. Arcturia, who succumbed to madness as well. I hate this one. I never know how to pronounce this one. Jehesria Kestelharp, who I believe is the one who betrayed Halister. And then Malene, who was an apprentice who was lost to time and history. Oh, and then the 7th is Ibalathal. So there you go.
Did Did
They were a red
Marine
wizard.
just not like have a cool title or anything like that? She's just Marine.
Well, she's the apprentice that was lost to time, but okay. Let me
Oh,
check.
she was lost to time. Did she die?
No, she was a human who specialized in absorption of arcane powers, memories, and souls, and it's rumored that Halister took her on due to her resistance to the spell plague that he somehow knew was coming. Everyone realizes that he was preparing for it after the fact, but no one knew how he knew about it. She was consumed by her own experiments when she summoned a life drinker specter that slowly drained away her memories and life force. She existed only as a ghost for a long period of time and was tortured by said spectre until recently freed by adventurers. That will be something that happens if your party encounter her in Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I believe.
And they are there. That's are they like?
I don't think all of them are there. Some of them are there.
No. Okay.
Because things get retconned from edition to edition. So
Yeah.
So anyway, they all descend down into the dungeon, and they just leave the tower, and it just over time turns into a ruin. And I don't know at what point Waterdeep begins cropping up around the hold, but it does happen. And over time, when the hold falls, Waterdeep becomes its own city, and like that's a History of Waterdeep episode. But the tower, in my headcanon, I remember reading somewhere that it fell, but I don't know whether that's true anymore. I don't know whether bits of it just fell apart and fell off. But in my mind, the tower itself fell, and instead of falling sideways, it just sank straight into the ground. And it left this giant hole where the roof would have been, that is now just this vertical tunnel into Undermountain. Yeah, I see your face. So what happens is you may recognize such hole as its nickname, the Yawning Portal, because many adventurers came to Undermountain and went exploring, and two of them were Durnan and Mert the Moneylender, who went down together, were two of the few adventurers to make it back out with riches galore, and with his money, Mert became Mert the Moneylender, and Durnan built the Yawning Portal over the mouth of Halister's hold, and charged adventurers to go down and venture down into it to explore for the riches themselves.
I love it. I love that I love that. Like, I'm going to stop any people from doing that, and they have to come through my tavern to do that.
Absolutely.
It's great.
And here's the thing, Mert and Durnan, although both humans, I believe Mert's a human, Durnan definitely is, they have lived a very long time, and it's kind of insinuated that Undermountain changed them in some way. And that's how they've become, or they've had this kind of extended existence. It's interesting.
Okay.
Because they've been around for loads of editions. And you've got to think, the current year in Faerun is 1493, I think, for Rime of the Frostmaiden. It's 1492 in Dragon Heist and Undermountain in Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So, and we play our Faerunian adventures in the year 1492. Obviously, that will change the longer we play for, but so it's interesting that Durnan's been around for well over the expected lifetime of a human. So that's kind of the history of Halister and how Undermountain is formed. He goes on to become obsessed with Undermountain, and he builds it out and extends it, and he brings in creatures from other planes to guard the upper levels as he descends further down, and starts using those as his base and laboratory. And at some point it connects to Skullport via the Salgarth River, which is Skullport, of course, is the thieving kind of den city underneath Waterdeep, and that's on level with the third level of Undermountain, as is the Xanathar hiding base, the main base of the Xanathars Guild.
I'd always this is probably because I didn't really know much about Skullport until today, where I was just getting some beforehand research. I thought the Skullport was just a port. just it was. I was like, okay, it's probably just a port somewhere. They do the occasional trading.
Did you not
thing
know
every
it was
now and then.
underground?
I had no idea, and it
Sam,
changes my.
You sat in
I
on
know.
episodes of Dragon Heist where they were in Skullport for 10 sessions, and I kept describing how dark and dingy and the cave cavern walls and the roof and the mushroom. How did you miss that?
I was imagining them like walking through the town in the daytime, the sun licking them, you know.
And that is why you need to pay attention when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
100%.
You have just completely ruined Skullport in its entirety. Skullport's a really interesting place because it's in this big open cavern. There's these really interesting characters in there. You have the flame skulls, the 13 skulls or the 12 skulls, and the Rumored 13th who guard it, and everyone walks around with lanterns, and you can't see like beyond 100 feet ahead of you or something because it's so dark.
Not being able to see is pretty cool.
It's a really, really cool place, and there's some really interesting characters, and that's why I used it. I mean, it's such a big part of both Waterdeep and Undermountain. Like, if Waterdeep, if you consider the city as like let's say you're doing a campaign just in Waterdeep, I did, I would consider the city half of that location.
Yeah.
Skullport is a quarter, and then Undermountain is a quarter, unless it's an Undermountain focused campaign, and then it shifts where Skullport and Waterdeep are a quarter, and Undermountain is the half. So like they all become for me that location. It's not just the city.
It's got layers,
like an onion.
Yeah.
Ogres have layers. Anyway, that was a great Shrek impression. Stop giving me that face.
No.
That is that is like the lore of Halister and Undermountain in a really quick kind of roundup way, because I don't want to spend the whole episode talking about it. I want to talk about how you can use it. So before we talk about that, do you have any questions about like lore in general?
I'm just sort of like confused why Halister can't stay in one position for very long. He seems a bit like flaky in the sense of like.
Oh, okay. So that's just poor storytelling then from my part. He like when he goes to what would be Waterdeep, he's been like in his like home for years, like basically his whole life.
He's drawn to the weave though, isn't he? That's like.
So it's kind of like, I feel like it's insinuated that he is.
Yeah.
But there's conflicting sources, as there would be with over like, what is it, like 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons? It's longer than that. I don't even know. Some say like I've read that he's mad before he goes, and he becomes mad, and then he builds Undermountain. Then I've read others where they say, oh, he was a little bit like mad. He's a wizard, and then he went to Waterdeep, he built his tower, he discovered Undermountain, and he went insane and went absolutely bonkers and just got obsessed with it, and then would never come back up. So it's kind of like, hey, you're the DM, why do you want him to be mad? What's the hook that you need? Use that, and then you can.
What was the hook that you went for, like in your world, in your version of Faerun's lore? Like what is your version of why he's there?
So I will get into that when I talk about what my plans are for Undermountain.
I'm just curious because it's like,
Do you have other lore questions before we do that? Because I'll go off on a tangent if we go into that now, and you won't get them answered. we just won't answer them.
Nothing that like comes to the top of my head really.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what I'll do then, I'll tell you in a roundabout way. I'll tell you what my lore for him is and what my story for Dungeon the Mad Mage was, because they are very interconnected. So where do I start? The first thing so the reason Halister is mad in my world is because he's got this unending obsession with collecting beautiful D&D dice, and he doesn't have a service like the Dice Dungeon. So I feel like if the Dice Dungeon existed in Faerun, he wouldn't have this insane madness going on. And to stop you, Sam, and anyone listening to the podcast from delving too deep into their own mega dungeon of their mind and becoming insanely obsessed with dice, I have partnered with the Dice Dungeon for over a year now to give you 10% off your entire basket when you shop with them. And they sell really, really nice D&D dice, Sam. Really nice ones.
I know. I've got a pair, and they do. To be fair, they keep me out of my own version of the Dungeon of the Mad Sam. It's very echoey in there.
Yeah, much like your dining room. I do have to say, legally, I have to tell you that while buying D&D dice from Dice Dungeon may stop you from delving into the madness of not having dice, it does open you up to the possibility of, getting obsessed with collecting D&D dice. So just bear that in mind. If you want to go and check out what they've got, there's not just dice there. You open that madness to anything. D&D books, dice trays, dice scrolls, the extra sort of things that you can have with D&D, like spell cards and stuff like that. Go have a look at their website. And if you are building out your mega dungeon, what better than to have some beautifully written descriptions for it for when you want to sell it on the open market, like on Zoopla or something. So if you go over to describe.dscryb.com, they have some really beautifully written box text that you can use to describe that mega dungeon in your D&D game. They've got location spells and monsters. They're adding new categories soon, and they're adding different box text every single day. There's loads of them you can get for free, so go and have a taste by following the link below. But if you like what you see, subscribe with 10% off every month for the first 2 years using the code COMMON on checkout.
I actually was snooping around Describe the other day, and they have some really good, like, free stuff. I'm too cheap for that, so I was just like, oh, what free content do they have to offer? Wow, they've got some cracking stuff.
Everybody loves free D&D content on the internet. You gotta go for it.
I was just like, how have they described it in this way?
Because they're professional writers. That's the point.
It's
go
great.
And look, it's so good. Okay, so in seriousness, then, one of the biggest critiques of Dungeon and the Mad Mage for storytellers, if that's what you're looking for, is that there is no story, really. It is true just a mega dungeon for you to go through, and when we say mega dungeon, like, oh my god, double page spread maps, 23 layers, Skullport included, although even that's a little bit lackluster. It is insane, and if you're in for a dungeon crawl with no story, like, all hands to you, go for it. But if you want a bit of story, it is lacking in that department. And I've had a look around the internet. I did a long time ago, and I couldn't find anything that really grabbed me. There was one that, like, wanted to make it like a show, and Halister thought he was like a show host, and I just hated it. Didn't like the flavor. It wasn't for me.
I
don't
like that.
Yeah, I don't love that one. One that I did see was a D&D Beyond post, actually, an article, and I saw that, and it spoke to me, and I ran with it, and I sort of adapted it for my own usage. So that's what I have as a story for Undermountain, and I'll talk about what that is in a second. A side note, if you are going to pick up Dungeon the Mad Mage, there's a fantastic Skullport supplement on DM's Guild, which is what I used for Skullport, and it's just so much better. Just forget everything in the book and use that. It's incredible, and I don't think it's awfully expensive either, so go check it out. I think it's like Skullport Shadow of Waterdeep or something like that. It's a really good supplement, especially if you're running a Waterdeep campaign like I was. So my plan was, and I always had the plan that the Waterdeep adventurers, the heroes of the heist as they've become to known, would be setting up the next adventure, which would be either Tomb of Annihilation, which they are now on, although it's different heroes. Also branching off into James's game, ran in the same world, which is Tyranny of Dragons, or they would follow the plot hooks and go down into Undermountain. And the heroes of the heist, being still in Waterdeep, could still do that, although I don't think they will, based on the decisions they made in the game. So I needed to give them a reason. I needed to link them in. And I wanted to use Manshoon because he had been, in our Waterdeep campaign with all 4 villains, he had been the hidden player all the way through. Like, he didn't get revealed until the final arc of that campaign. And it needed to be compelling. And I also wanted him to be different. I didn't want him to just be some evil wizard.
Yeah, no, I liked your Manshoon. He was very,
thank you.
Like, I'm powerful, but I'm not that bad.
Yeah. Manshoon is another one that needs a whole lore episode on about, but he was a very evil, very powerful wizard who made lots of clones of himself to be able to live forever. It's either that or lichdom for a wizard, basically. And one day, I don't know if it was during the spell plague, I can't remember without looking up, but something happened and all of the clones woke up at the same time, all of them believing that they were the true Manshoon. And so this series of years, and I think it's like a couple of decades, happened that became to be known as the Manshoon Wars, where all of these different Manshoons were just hunting each other down and killing each other. And it's unknown, and it's not put in writing exactly how many Manshoons survived and if the original survived. And so he's the kind of character who can come up in a number of different campaigns that you play with the same group, and each time he can be completely different. Like there's one Manshoon who's a vampire, there's one who's a good guy, there's one who's a bad guy, there's one who really likes horses, like it's like variants in Loki.
Yeah, I was literally, as you were saying that, I was like, oh, he's got his own like set of variants. Yeah, it's great. Literally. The TVA are going to be getting on him.
So this version of Manshoon in my Waterdeep campaign, I wanted him to be not so evil. Like he's still bad. Like don't get me wrong, he still has history behind him of the original Manshoon, and he has to live with that, and he has to live in hiding for his whole life because everybody thinks he's just evil. But he's also changed and learned over time. And in his story, he is, for me, I made him the version of Manshoon that is canonical, that went into hiding in Undermountain and became friends with Halister and trained under him for years. Because Halister is constantly taking apprentices. He loves to make people powerful magic users, and then he likes to fight them and piss about with them and have fun and stuff. So he and Halister became really good friends. Obviously, this is now my canon. This isn't like Faerun lore. So when I say they did this happened, this is what happened in my
Important.
version.
This never happened.
This never happened. I mean, bits of it happened. There was a Manshoon that went down into Undermountain and did get on with Halister, I believe. So anyway, he stayed down there in hiding for years and eventually discovered what was happening to Halister. And that is that over time, and I revealed it through the journal that the players found when they, spoiler alert, killed my Manshoon.
They murdered him. It
was brutal.
I was like, I think I was actually playing a NPC stat block at the time, and I was like, I haven't been with the party long enough to like even make a say, but I'm not happy about this.
Yeah. Two of the characters didn't want to, but we'll get into that. But basically, he had discovered that the knot in the weave was controlling Halister. It had changed, and it was racking and gripping his mind. And I imagine this knot, like, imagine how radiation, when you cover it with layers and layers of concrete, it's still, if you put a Geiger counter up against like 60 feet of concrete, you still get a little tick every now and then on the Geiger counter, right?
There's some way of it like going through.
Yeah. So I imagine that this knot in the weave is seeping up through the ground. I mean, it's not up, it's not underneath the ground, is it? It's who knows where it is? It's inimaginable.
It's intangible.
Yeah, but it's seeping through Undermountain, and it's gripped Halister's mind, and it is controlling him. And that's why Brom, who is another player in our game, had weird stuff happen to him when he was in Waterdeep, because this quote unquote radiation of the weave was like seeping into him and affecting his connection to the demon queen of fungus. So that's another story. I got so many of them, man. So
Ben setting up future episodes of Legends of Lore with just this one.
yeah. This is the Nexus event. So Halister became controlled by the weave, and in my like DM notes, I have written that the knot became a sentient creature. The knot is alive. The knot is a thing of magic, of pure arcanic energy that is conscious now. It has been living for so long that it has grown, and it's seen Halister and gone, hey, pretty boy, I like your dungeon. I want that. And it's seeped into his brain, and it is making him insane, like incredibly insane. So in my version of the world, Halister started making his Undermountain, and he was like, this is cool, I like this. And he got a bit obsessed with it because he's an obsessive person. You kind of have to be a wizard, and you devote your life to studying. And then the knot grabbed him, and he went absolute barmy and just lost control. And so Manchun noticed this and said, "Oh, okay, this isn't good. You're not right. I need to save you somehow." And he did all this research, and he came to the conclusion that the only way he could save his now best friend was to kill him, like just free him of the hold. So he challenged him to a wizard duel. Halister maniacally giggled and said, yeah, absolutely, all right. But if I win, I want your arm." Literally, he's just like, "I want your arm." So inevitably, Manchun lost, and Halister took his arm and buried it somewhere in his vault. And Manchun ran and left Undermountain and went into hiding in Kolat Towers, and that's where you find him in Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And so when my players got to him, having had all of these important people, Illyriel Silverhand, the Black Staff, all these people who they trusted or at least were working with, if they didn't trust them, when they said, "Hey, we know who the last person is, it's Manchun," they said, "Whatever you do, just kill him on sight. Like, we do not need to deal with this. We've got gang wars going on. We've got the Xanathars getting too big for his proverbial boots. Skullport is in a wreck because the flame skulls have disappeared. Like, the city is effectively burning. Just kill him. Just put a bullet in his head. Don't even listen to him." And so the players went in there with that thinking. And my plan was that they'd go in and a few of them would listen to him, because they always do, and they'd go against it. And a couple of them wanted to, a couple of them really did, but the party outvoted, and you go with the flow, and they fought Manchun, they killed him, and they found the notebook. And then the two that really wanted to help him went through and realized, in his notes that he was saying, I have to hide in the shadow because of what another man did in my face and name. I am not that person. I am a different Manchun to that Manchun, and I want to save my friend, etc., etc.
He's lived a rough existence.
Yeah,
that
100%. Born into infighting with yourself, and then having to go into hiding and finding that everybody hates you. I mean, that's hard. He has the memories because he's a clone, but he's different. So anyway, he's dead, and the players have his notes, and they have all these notes on, like, the knot is alive and that it's got hold of Halister, and he also says in his notes, Halister is fighting it. Halister is trying to take control of his body, and that is why he is inviting people down to Undermountain, because he wants strong adventurers to come into Undermountain, fight their way from level 1 to 23, get as strong as they can, because only the strongest can do it, and then meet him and kill him and put him at ease. That's what Halister wants, because he knows he's under the control of the knot.
I love that. That is so, like, I don't know, eerily, like, beautiful.
It's like a little bit poetic, isn't it?
Yeah, a tiny fragment of himself is trying to stop him from, being more connected with it.
And in these moments of lucidity, that is when Halister appeared in my campaign. The players were in Skullport for like 10 sessions in succession, and they went to this tea house, and he was there drinking tea with an old friend of his, and she was a little bit shaken that these PCs had walked in, and they got to see his full madness. The best thing about this character is that he can just chop and change from friend to enemy to narcissistic bastard with the flick of a switch. He could literally be a different Halister on every single level of Undermountain, because he's just freaking nuts. And he took Brom's poem book, or his quote book, and he ripped a page out because he really liked the quote. And the party were like, "Hey, buddy, that's not nice. Are you going to fix that?" And he was like, "Oh, sorry, I wish for this poem book to be better." And he just wished for the book to be better again, because he's just nuts. And they instantly realized, they didn't realize it was Halister at first. They instantly realized they were in trouble with this guy who was just nuts in front of them.
That he just did like a pretty powerful spell for no reason.
Nothing. Exactly. Yeah. And it got to the point where right at the end of Waterdeep, they needed something. They needed the final key to get into the vault. And they contacted Halister for it and invited him to their tavern. And it was such a risk. Like they didn't know what if he could have walked in there and gone, "Wow, this place is nice. I want it." And wished for it to be an Undermountain. Like, that's how powerful he is. He's ridiculous. So they wished for him to be that. They called out to him, and he arrived, and that's how they had interactions with him. But in their notes,
he had like, didn't he? I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but like they said they needed like a drow hand, and he just
they needed
got one.
One of the keys. So all of the keys in my version of Waterdeep were linked to the different villains. So the idea was they could heist the villains for the keys if they wanted to, and they needed the drow hand of a member of Breakendarth, and they asked Halister to get one, and he just like literally wished for one in his hand, and like turned his back to them, cast a spell, and then turned back around, and there was just this hand with blood like seeping out of the wrist, and he just like materialized it off of a drow somewhere.
I remember that vividly. It was such a funny moment.
Yeah, funny and also like terrifying.
Yeah,
because he just doesn't care. But so the reason Manshoon was also so affected by Halister is that he discovered in his time in Undermountain with him that Halister was, and this is canon, Halister creates hundreds and hundreds of clones of himself so that he can't die. And in my campaign, the knot in the weave made him do that because Halister has basically effectively become the avatar of this weave. Like that is what Halister is to the knot. And so it gets his in control of Halister, using him as his avatar, makes tons of clones. So when Halister dies, the knot grabs his soul and just puts it into one of the clones so that he lives forever. And so he is constantly in this loop of just immortal life, going insane, being controlled by this entity that shouldn't exist, and just wants to break free. But if you just kill him, he will just get just put into a body of his clone.
So, do you need to go stab those bodies before you kill him?
Well, this is the thing. That's kind of up to the players. Manshoon is so terrified that what happened to the Manshoon clones will happen to the Halister clones. And if you thought the Manshoon wars were bad, or the Halister wars would be even worse because they'd all be fucking nuts.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
And that is still an impending apocalypse on my version of Faerun. That could happen at any point. Like at any point. Because no one's gone to deal with it. So that's like a ticking time bomb in a way. And so the adventure is that the Manshoon in Waterdeep, if you teamed up with him, he wanted the Horde of Dragons to fund an adventuring party strong enough to go down into Undermountain, kill Halister, and then wish for his soul to pass on. They would have to wish for it to not be caught by the weave, effectively. And in doing so, they would anger the weave and then move on to like the level 20 boss fight. So, because Halister isn't the boss in this campaign. He's like the boss before the boss. So that's what Manshoon wanted, and his motivations were, if I do this for the city, maybe they'll let me come out of hiding and they'll stop telling people I'm evil. And like it was a little bit selfish, but it was also not selfish. So he's kind of a grey area character. So the idea for the story, for the adventure, is that the players descend into Undermountain, they fight their way through, they get strong, they fight Halister, they've encountered him along the way. They fight him, they kill him, and they use a 9th level wish to help his spirit and his soul pass on to whatever afterlife awaits him. At which point, the knot in the weave begins to get angry. So this knot, all it wants to do is expand Undermountain to exist along the entirety of Toril. It wants to have Undermountain be as a dungeon that extends everywhere around the planet. And once it's done that, who knows what will happen, where it will look next, to above ground, to beyond Toril, to the plains. We don't know, and that's a scary thought. And so it's angry that its avatar and its way of doing that, it's one way of connecting with the material plane, has been taken away from it. And so it reaches out and it uses its last bit of strength to extend its magics and bring Undermountain down on the players. So you then have this hectic escape 23 levels under, where they have to get up while parts of this dungeon collapse around them and creatures are going wild, and like the apprentice wizard school that's on one of the levels goes nuts. There's a spelljammer ship down there somewhere. Like there's all this cool stuff, and it's all just coming down on top of it, right? Changing the face of Faerun forever. They get to the top of Undermountain, they get out back up onto the streets of Waterdeep, and sections of the city, parts of the wards are just sinking into the ground. Like the dock ward, flooded. The trades ward, massive sinkhole. Like it's awful. And the weave, the knot in the weave, pushes its magic out, and takes control of the walking statues of Waterdeep. And these statues that haven't moved for years suddenly come to life because they are a defense mechanism for Waterdeep, and the only person who can control them is the Blackstaff. So she inevitably tries to stop them, but she can't. And so the players then, surrounded by the devastation of Waterdeep that is falling and crumbling, have to fight 1, 2, maybe 3 of these giant walking statues. And when they destroy the walking statues, the weave materializes in form, coalesced out of those statues in front of them, and they have to fight the weave, kill the knot. Well, not fight the weave, fight the knot in the weave, kill it, and thus untangling the weave itself and making magic better. It's this epic conclusion to this 20th level adventure, and it would be really cool to run.
It's nowhere near what I expected the ending of that to be, but it's so much cooler. I like that.
Thank you. But then of course that then has repercussions in the sense that, Halister no longer exists. Undermountain is now a ruin. So Undermountain could still exist, but it would be forever changed. And it would be a proper dungeon that, at the moment in Faerun, it's like a breathing dungeon that's constantly changing and things are being added and stuff. And at this point, if this happened, it would become a ruin of a dungeon that eventually could be plundered completely, which would be an interesting, do floods of adventurers then suddenly come because the risk is gone and they just want to get as much out as they can and stuff like that. But then also, and this is the thing that my players don't know because one of them has a very special connection to Durnan. They've released the magic of the weave that's keeping Durnan and Mert ever existing. And so from that point on, they begin to age and they begin to eventually die.
Oh no.
Yeah. So it's a little bit bittersweet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the story. Have you any questions about that before we move on?
Not really. I like that. That sounds like an adventure, like a good adventure to be a part of.
Thanks, man.
I like that Halister isn't the biggest bad of it, if that makes sense. And I like that there's I feel like when obviously this isn't your own, you haven't made Halister, but often when running a big bad evil guy, it can fall into they're evil, but only evil. They are all evil and everything about them is evil, Knievel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
that's what I love about Jalax or Manshoon. They're so grey.
Yeah, I just like that part that there is a slight part of him that wants this all to stop and he wants to get rid of it, and that's why he's drawing people in. And I don't know, I just love that.
And I like as well that it offers the twist at the end. And this is where we transition into how to use this if you're running Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and then how to use Halister and Undermountain in any setting in game. But if you were going to run this story, and if I've got all of the story prepped out and I haven't done all of the mechanical prep because we never actually ran the campaign. But my plan would be to have Halister appear at different points during the dungeon, as I think you should, because he can, and it's just interesting, and that's how I would incorporate the story through the dungeon crawl, because it's not there in other places. You can have it in some of the NPCs, there is a wizard school in there. Halister's got a wizard school somewhere in Undermountain, and there are apprentices and you can be his apprentice and stuff, but you need to have interactions with him. And so sometimes he would appear and he'd be a dick, he'd be a villain because he'd be controlled by the weave, or he'd be a villain in the sense that he's gonna fight you a little bit, but only because he wants you to get stronger and know how to kill him. So he's doing it to help you. And then other times he'll arrive and he'll be just giddy and like a child. And other times he'll be completely lucid and he'll be a very scholarly, well-spoken wizard who can tell you things about the weave and stuff. So that's how I would put the story in as you go through dungeon.
Yeah, that's something, especially having seen parts of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, seeing parts of it looks as though it would be hard to put some story bits in, but to have something to have there, if that makes sense. So
definitely.
Even Foundation is good.
When you look at the the book, it's intimidating, especially if you're not into dungeon crawls. And I think the risk is that players get bored of dungeon crawls unless that's what they love, unless that's their niche, and it isn't for everybody. And so, you know, you might want to have a campaign where they have a base in Skullport and they come and go, or they have a base at Waterdeep and they have a way of coming and going from Undermountain, although Undermountain itself has like rules around teleportation magics and stuff and things too. So you kind of have to cater that side of it to your group, and it's hard to give specific advice without knowing who you're running the game for and what they like. But if you can incorporate and find ways to have story encounters on multiple times on multiple floors, then you're gonna have a better experience with those characters that like story. And if they're characters who have story moments within their party and things that they want, like if they're going into Undermountains for different reasons and they can talk about that and they can have RP moments, then even better.
Yeah, because like I was thinking when before I came into this, I was like, okay, would players need to like inject a lot of RP into this just to give it some sort of story to work with? Because we've obviously got like a really good group that we can inject story into anything. Wes can walk into the most boring situation and make it somehow very interesting and very like story heavy. Yeah. So I was just curious to whether like that could be like a potential problem for somebody that was trying to run that sort of dungeon. What if they haven't got a group that is able to like just inject story into it?
I think it's definitely harder. It would definitely be harder, and that's where the prep on the DM's part is going to be key. But like this isn't just a dungeon either. Like we talk about it being a mega dungeon, and it is in the sense that there are like the first few levels are quite barren because they're the levels that have been explored the most, because they're the easiest levels and they're the easiest levels to get to. But there are things going on in these levels that aren't just in normal dungeons. Like one of the early levels has goblins that have set themselves up a little marketplace.
Oh, like, I love that.
And you walk in and they're like buying and selling stuff. So, you know, and in my world, the Vault of the Dragons is off of a section of the 3rd level of Undermountain. So like you can incorporate, you know, there are tunnels that don't go anywhere. They're just kind of left for you to fill out if you want to. So you can incorporate stories in any way. You've just got to find those hooks that you have that you know your players are going to like and put them in. And I wouldn't be afraid of putting interesting NPCs in a dungeon. Just because it's got the word dungeon in it doesn't mean it can't have interesting RP encounters with characters. This is the dungeon for that.
There are going to be other people that are going in there for like...
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
You
the same reasons. You could have a rival party. Yeah, like I just the prospect of that is really cool. Just meeting people that are just out for the same purpose, and you've got to like race against them, sort of.
If Manchin had lived as well, I would have used the group patron rules for him for the party. Yeah. That would have been really cool as well. So he would have been able to help and given assistance and given you magics and given you like members of the Zentarum to join you and stuff. So there's stuff that you can do with that too. You can have them come across faction members. A member of like, I think there is a party in the book written that like are split up and lost, and you find members of them dead and some of them alive as you go through. So there are bits of story in there.
Yeah.
The job is just like taking those as DM and seeding them, and that's the important bit, is like planting the seed so that when the players get to them it's not random. And with Undermountain, that's the really like daunting bit, because the book is thick, man. It is a big book, and I always like to read the adventure fully. It's a crazy
big dungeon as well, like compared to... So a lot of the dungeon, because I've been making my own like final
big
dungeon, I've had to look at like heaps of like some from the Yawning Portal book and like loads of different dungeons that are there. It's a lot bigger. I was like,
take a
wow,
shot
that's
every time we
intimidating.
say dungeon this episode.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's
it's
a great
huge.
game.
It is. It's actually. Do you know what? I'm gonna. Where is it? Here it is. It is. I think it's the second thickest book I have. I think Tyranny of Dragons, the reprint that holds both books, is bigger. But that is a 1 to 20, whereas this is a 5 to 20. This book, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, is 320 pages long. And I like to read an entirety of the book at least twice and make notes on it before I run it. And the thoughts of doing that are daunting, but they would be so rewarding because you can make such an interesting story out of this campaign. Let's talk about as we come to the tail end of this episode, let's talk about using Halister and then potentially Undermountain in your games, whether you're in Faerun or not. I think that this is one of the easiest things to port over to any setting. Because
I was thinking that because obviously
every setting has magic, right?
Yeah.
Every setting has its own version of the weave. Every setting has a big city where stuff happens. You can just insert this lore anywhere. And, there are little sidebars in a lot of the adventures that say, if you're not doing this in Faerun, here are some options of where it could be in other worlds. And sure, they include like Kryn, Greyhawk, and that's it. But it gives you an idea of like where you would put it. Like I think in Wildmount, give me a really big city in Wildmount. You run a Wildmount campaign.
Oh, the main city that my players spend a lot of time in is Zadash.
Is that the one? Remind me, is that the one with the Cerberus Assembly and the Wizard School?
It does have a wizard school, but it's not like the capital city with like the big wizard school. It's like the sub capital.
Okay,
I'd say.
So if the big capital, which I believe is that Rexingtrim.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rexingtrim already has a lot going on for it. Great. Stick this mega dungeon underneath Zadash. Bang. Done. He was a mad teacher at the wizard school who lost his mind and started building a dungeon to run trainee wizards through to test their might and their spell usage. And eventually he was, chastised by the upper board of the school because he was killing too many apprentices. And so he said, fine, fuck off, I'll go into my dungeon. And he's still down there to this day, so the legend says.
Christ. Done. Yeah, no, it's surprisingly like malleable. I like that with adventures, because especially with hearing like now that the Wild Beyond the Witchlight is sort of making it so that it can be put anywhere, I believe.
So this is the thing. You said this a couple of times, and I want to clarify that with you because I feel like that's exactly the same. Like I feel like they're selling this as a point, and it's as a selling point.
No, 100%. They've done it before.
But it's exactly the same as Curse of Strahd. Curse of Strahd happens in a pocket dimension. The Feywild is another plane. Yes, that can fit into any campaign because you're literally setting it in another plane.
I just love excuses to carry on playing in Wildmount. So
but this is the thing. You can play. Then this is what I want to put across, and I think maybe we do an episode on this specific skill, like later down the line, is how do you take, I think we've talked about it before, but how do you take any adventure and run it in any setting? If you said to me, Sam, I want to run Tomb of Annihilation, but in Exandria, and all I don't know about the other continents, all I know about is Tal'Dorei and Wildmount, I'd be like, great, okay, cool. All you need to do is literally say that Chult, or a version of Chult, give it a different name if you want to, like rename
it's like it could just be
another continent or an island in the south where it's hot. Like that's so easy, and you can do that with anything. Rhyme the Frost Maiden, right? Just put a version of 10 towns in the Wild Wastes or whatever it's called.
I know this is going off of our main topic, but like with Rhyme, it was very much like I was reading some of that. I haven't read like a lot. I've read just
bits
monsters, items, and like the beginning bits. And there were bits that I was just like, Isilcross is perfect for this.
This is
and
what I'm
injected
saying. And Waterdeep Dragon Heist, literally any city. All you have to do is swap out the NPCs. And I know like people, people say this because I used to think it too. And I'm like, but I don't want to do all that work. It's not that much work. If you're going to prep for the campaign anyway, it's the same amount of work. It's just part of the prep. Hang on. Let me hit you with another one. What have I got? I don't have many adventures. Okay. Fucking Waterdeep Dragon Heist just became a level 1 to 20 campaign set on Ravnica, right? Because the money is a ridiculous amount of money and every single one of the guilds wants it. What else have we got?
That in itself gets. I
Tyranny
like
of Dragons. Tyranny of Dragons. Fuck me, you could do that anywhere because it's not set in a specific location. All you have to do is port over the Way of the Dragons and the gods and the cult, and you're done. It's an adventure where you travel, right? Great,
Yeah.
Perfect.
I love it.
If there's anything you take from this today, Sam, and those of you listening, do not be afraid to port written adventures over to your own or different settings. It is not as hard as you think it is, and once you start thinking about it and you start doing it, the ball just rolls and it gets bigger and bigger.
I'm like 100%. I always look at the adventures and I'm like, I really want to put that in Wildmount just because I'm familiar with it. I know Wildmount like the back of my hand now.
And I think I said this to you recently, like the fact that I run Faerun with James as this timeline that continues and it's got history now, that makes me never want to leave Faerun because I've got all of this baked-in
up-levels
stories.
the campaign completely.
100%.
Like every campaign, you're like, I'm gonna see this experience in our next adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Like that in itself is so cool. So I've definitely, and going off of this, like from the dungeon of the Mad Mage, that like the idea that I could just put that anywhere.
It's definitely easier with some campaigns than others. But like this is my point. Like everybody who runs a D&D world and like even if you just played a 1 to 15 campaign in one setting, right? That's going to be hard to leave. Leaving that campaign setting and going to another will always be difficult. It's like when you delete your finished save file on Pokemon and you have to start another one because you can only have one, right? It's hard to leave that behind. You don't have to leave it behind. You can always go back, but that's what it feels like. So either you grow a pair and you do it because you're missing out on all of the amazing other experiences of different settings out there, or, and this is how I feel with my homebrew world, you know, the world of Car. When Car is at a point where I can launch a second campaign in it, it's going to be really hard to leave Faerun for 100%. The period of time that we leave go to Car. But at the same time, when we go back to Faerun, all of that time will have passed and it will look different and it will be even more interesting. So it's amazing. That's great. But at the same time, like, I don't want to leave it. So you can either just grow a pair and do it, or you do what I did and you put on your tinfoil hat and you go deeper than anyone would normally go, and you say, every game that I run in Faerun happens on the same version of Faerun, but everything that happens on my version of Ravnica happens on the same version of Ravnica, and both of those
he's gonna do it, guys. He's gonna do it
within the same version of the material plane, and thus are both planets that exist within the same setting of Spelljammer.
Oh, I knew he was going to do it.
And so any powerful wizard can travel from one world to another, and if you know how, you can get a ship and travel the stars. And that's how I've kind of got over the fact that at some point I'm going to have to leave Faerun for a little bit.
Yeah, you have to connect them so that at some point you can just go back.
I've made my own cinematic universe. That's what I've done.
I love it. And you have. What's great about it is no one will see it.
Will you say that?
We get to experience it in
the
like
moment,
a really awesome way, and we get to watch it unfold.
You guys at the moment are experiencing the like Avengers to Avengers Age of Ultron to Civil War era of the MCU, right? It's cool.
I can't wait for Infinity War.
All the adventurers are coming together and it's like, oh my god, all of the characters that I know and love from all these different campaigns that we've played are all in the same universe. That's so cool. So just you wait, buddy, when Thanos comes along, because, buddy, he is in the shadows. He is coming.
Is it just that character that Joe made with the Ioun stones that we've got to go against him? He's collected them all.
It's the own version of the Infinity Stones. There's 16 of them. So eventually there will be an end game threat level adventure held in my version of the material plane, and that's the thing, and that's what's cool, and that's why I've pushed myself to get to this level of deepness, is that I don't just say, yeah, it's my version of Faerun or it's my version of Eberron. I say, oh no, this is my version of the universe. This is my version of the material plane and the planes that travel around them. And that's fucking cool, man. It's so fun.
That is it. It's just badass. I love it. I love every moment of it.
I appreciate it.
On the note of like that, I think the main conversation point of this podcast,
The actual topic, yeah. Going back to Halister.
You know that I'm like a sucker for cool monsters and cool just enemies to go against. What are some of the like hot boys? In the dungeon of the Mad Mage that like really, tickle the fancy and just like exciting encounters to run, because that's always what I'm most excited about.
Okay, let me grab the book because I won't know off the top of my head. I had to pop the light on as well because it got dark in here. Because we're having a lovely evening chat. So
I just watched Ben slowly fade into darkness.
Yeah, over the course of the last hour and a half. Oh, this is a really difficult one because, like I say, it's a really thick book. Level 9, Dwemer Core, is a really cool one. That's the level that has an academy of magic designed to like test and trap and confound its students. By that point, I think that it's the party size the book is balanced for is 4. So at that point, you've got a party of 4 level 10 characters, and it's a really interesting like just level. It's not one of the biggest, but it's just got some fun stuff in it. I think there's Nothics hiding around of like students who have gone mad. There's traps and magic like items and stuff. There are some interesting stat blocks in the back. So there's the human warrior who we mentioned earlier, who became Halister's bodyguard, who turned themselves into a half scorpion centaur creature. That's statted out in this book.
Oh, I love that.
So, Muriel awesome. Is a large monstrosity. I think it's a he, but I'm going to say they just to be safe. They are a 13th level spellcaster, so they have up to 7th level spells. They have Finger of Death, which is cool. They have 3 legendary resistance. They can make 3 attacks, 2 with... Oh, it's a he. 2 with his long sword and 1 with his stinger, because he's a scorpion. He has legendary actions like casting cantrips. He has a lunging attack and a retreating strike. So he's just really fucking weird. Like he's this big skeleton.
Yeah, I just love that
scorpion human thing. What else have we got? I mean, Halister himself is cool. There's not many stat blocks in the book because most of them are covered. The werebats are fun.
What? Just because I haven't got the book right in front of me, like what is Halister's stat block like in comparison to, say, I don't know, other more powerful wizards, or the Archmage stat block, which you should never use.
The Archmage stat block is shit. And you should never touch it. So Halister is written, he's pretty cool. I would probably beef him up a little bit because of the party, and also in the same sense that I beefed up a Serac because of like the level of the story that we're telling and stuff like that. So for your kind of like knowledge, Sarac's a challenge rating 23, so is Halister. So they're on level as written. And not because that's not saying that that a Serac is on level with a human wizard. You got to remember Halister is an immortal wizard too, much like a Serac. His prepared spell stat block is quite interesting. He has Meteor Swarm, Wish, Maze, Finger of Death, Chain Lightning. He has Globe of Invulnerability, all that stuff. So, the fun stuff, but you can change that up. He has some special equipment. So he has a Robe of the Eyes. He has a Blast Scepter. What else has he got? He has a Horned Ring, which allows him to ignore the magical resistance within, like the resistances within Undermountain. So he's just not affected by its, like, curses.
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, he can cast a spell as a legendary action, as you would expect. I would buff him. I would buff him up for my party, but he's a cool character. I also realised today, looking at him, that he looks like what Orlo's going to look like when he's an old man. The other thing as well is that you can buff him by going into the real lore and finding all of the spells that he's invented over time.
Yeah.
So they're fun. There are also these Elder Runes scattered across Undermountain that he's created, and he can use those, which are really fun. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with him.
Okay, because there was another thing I saw that, like, in a really odd way, him and the dungeon have become like
one and the same.
Yeah, one and the same. He is the dungeon and the dungeon is him, but they're not, but they are.
In the final combat with him, I would do I would probably do a couple of things. I don't know how quite mechanically this would work without like actually sitting down and mathematically planning it out, but I would have him being able to being in this position where he's fighting for control of his body with the weave while he's fighting you. And so when the weave's in control of him, the weave has a set of legendary actions where it can bring parts of the dungeon down, and it can like shake the earth and call in monsters. And when Halister's in control, he has the more typical like spell legendary actions and stuff. And Halister will still be fighting you because he wants you to kill him. He wants you to free him from the control. But you get to see like these weird two sides of him, and that will just kind of reinforce that madness as well. So yeah, I want to plan something like that for the final fight with him.
That's just something that I think is cool. I can imagine like even to the level of like corridors just appearing and like things just running down them straight towards a party. Just I love it.
Definitely. I also do want to note there is a Mind Flayer spell jammer within Undermountain. So if you want to bring and a helm as well down there. So if you want to bring Spelljammer into your game, that's the way.
Can you fly it out of there?
You would have to find another way to get it out because you don't know how it got in there. Halister.
You could fly it out as it's all falling and go. Oh, that would be so badass.
That is one way. Yes, I did think about that. But you have to get the helm from Halister's personal. Like that's the seat. That's his throne. The helm is his throne.
Oh, that's cool.
So you have to go and get that, but I think it's his throne, or it's in his lair on level 23. But so getting that to work would be really cool. If not, you could like wish it out, because the idea is that Halister like he travels the planes or he pulls things in from other planes. So one day he just reached out and grabbed a Spelljammer and went, "I want that," and put it in one of the levels.
He's almost like a kid that like sees a toy and he's just like, "I want that. Give it to me."
He's a kleptomaniac, 100%.
Yeah, I love that. I just the possibilities that can bring. You can put anything in there. You can just go ham. I love it.
I feel like I'm going to listen back to this episode and be like, fucking hell, Ben, you spoke at like 55 miles per hour because you were so excited to talk about this. I'm like, oh my God, you could do this and you could do this. Ah. So I'm really sorry if I've given anyone anxiety.
You've been going on about this for a long time, and
I'm partly gutted that we didn't transition into this campaign, but I'm also not, because I wanted to run Tomb of Annihilation and I've had it planned since it released. So either way I would have been happy, and I would have felt this like if we'd have gone down the other branching timeline and played this adventure, we'd be sitting here talking about Tomb of Annihilation. So there's that.
Can you imagine that conversation?
Oh God, mate.
What kind of interesting monsters are there, Ben? What interesting ideas have you got for that, Ben? Oh, God.
I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you what you're going to be doing when you reach 20th level if you survive.
I'll just say this for the listeners that are like, so obviously there are the people on the Patreon that like will get the occasional update from like our home game.
Yeah, we just talk about it, yeah.
So recently Ben just injected, like, we'd all sort of probably forgotten about it, and it wasn't necessarily anything we like. I didn't even note it down yet. It was probably quite an important thing to note down because I remember noticing it when it happened. But my character just had a slardy kind of tadpole.
Yeah,
manifesting.
You fought a red slad in one of the mines, and you failed the Constitution check. And that was over a month ago in game time. And the slard tadpoles take 3 months to gestate. And then it literally says that they just burst out of your chest. Like you start feeling sick and an hour later you're dead.
That was just a shocker for me. when I go over to a guy and he just gets rid of it. And I'm like, wait, what? And we're all like,
you were...
wait, what?
You were in the Temple of Savras with Grandfather Zimbabwe, and he being a diviner... pulled you over and cured you, and I think 3 of the players went, "Oh shit, I know what that is."
Because I remember having to do the Constitution save and then going, "Oh well, I haven't seen anything about it. Can't be that important.
I have a little tracker sheet for like things that are wrong with each of the player, like what diseases and stuff they have, and it's had that on it for so long, and I'm so glad I can delete that now. But I was genuinely like concerned that you weren't gonna go and see Grandfathers in Tamway.
That would have been like so
just
funny.
One random day, a just xenomorph would have just burst out of your chest, because that would have been so unrewarding for you as well.
Yeah, but I think it would have been funny, and that's like, you know.
You say that now, you wouldn't have been happy if it had ever happened.
No, I can imagine us getting to like high levels, probably like, you know, getting towards like the end game stuff maybe, and
no,
frog just burst out of my chest.
Yeah. Anyway, look, we've been talking for ages, so we should wrap this up. So thank you for letting me tell you all about the lore of Halister and Undermountain. I've really enjoyed it.
I've loved it, and you've just given me more reasons to want to read this book and run it in Wildemount.
Yeah, definitely. I think
definitely on the list.
My parting advice is don't become discouraged if you read through it and you can't find any story. There is story there. You just have to insert it and find it and build it. That's your job as the DM. You can do it. I believe in you. Cool.
That was everybody. We believe in all of you.
Yeah, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the listener. I don't believe in you. You couldn't do it.
No, you know, it's fine. He only relies on me for every topic suggestion. It's all good.
Oh, shut up.
I knew I could get it in there in the last minute.
You're
okay, Ben, I've really got to go now.
Yeah, of course you have. All right, buddy.
It's getting real late.
If you want to get involved with the podcast, all the normal ways of doing it, at We Speak Common on Twitter and Instagram, WeSpeakCommon@hotmail.com for the D&D Agony Aunt. It is reopened again. If you've got any problems in your campaign, you want to hear how I would tackle it and how someone else would tackle it, bring those in. I want to hear them. And if you want to support the show, the links to the Patreon are in the description below. Sam, thank you very much. Have a fantastic evening, even though we're both sweating profusely in this hot English weather. And I will speak to you very, very soon.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, do us a favour and share us with a friend or a D&D group near you. If you'd like to directly support We Speak Common, you can by heading to the links in the description, either on this episode or via our social medias to find our Patreon. It's the best way to directly support the production of more shows like the one you listened to today. You can connect with the show on Twitter and Instagram at We Speak Common. The music in the episode is Street Dancing by Timecrawler 82 and is held under a Creative Commons 4.0 license. You can find it on the Free Music Archive.